Did you know that from the 5th to the 15th century, the biggest movers and shakers weren't always kings? What if the most powerful hands were often those adorned with royal rings belonging to queens who literally decided who sat on the throne or fought tooth and nail to keep their chosen heir there? Number 11. Fredegund. The shadowy world of the Merovingian Franks in the 6th century was a brutal place filled with feuds, assassinations, and constant power struggles. In this cutthroat arena, Fredegund emerged not just as a survivor, but as a formidable force who shaped the destiny of kings. She was initially a servant in the household of King Chilperic, the first of Neustria, a region of the Frankish kingdom. Her ambition, cunning, and ruthlessness were legendary. Even in an age known for its harshness, Fredegund quickly rose through the ranks, eventually becoming the king's mistress, and then his queen after he inexplicably had his previous queen, Galswinthe, murdered. This act ignited a bitter decades-long rivalry with Galswinthe's sister Brunhilda, who was queen in the neighboring kingdom of Austrasia. This conflict would define much of Fredegund's life and her influence on the succession. Fredegund bore Chilperic several sons, but one by one, they died. In infancy or early childhood, often under suspicious circumstances, which she attributed to her rival, Brunhilda's curses. Each loss fueled her paranoia and her determination to secure the future of her dynasty through any means necessary. Her last surviving son was Chlothar, born in 584. His survival became her singular obsession and the driving force behind her king-making endeavors. When King Chilperic I was assassinated in 584, a crime that many historians suspect Fredegund herself might have orchestrated her. Her infant son, Chlothar, was now the only direct male heir to the Neustrian throne, and the kingdom was surrounded by hostile relatives and ambitious nobles who saw an opportunity to seize power. Fredegund, however, was no ordinary grieving widow. She acted with astonishing speed and political acumen. Immediately after Chilperic's death, she took drastic measures to protect her infant son and solidify his claim to the throne. She gathered key Neustrian nobles who were loyal to her and secured their oaths of allegiance to young Chlothar. She then appealed to King Guntram of Burgundy, Chilperic's brother, for protection, shrewdly exploiting the complex web of family loyalties and rivalries among the Merovingian kings. Guntram, wary of his other nephew, Childebert II of Austrasia, Brunhilda's son, and perhaps seeing an opportunity to extend his own influence, agreed to become the protector of Chlothar and his kingdom. This was a critical move, as Guntram's support provided a temporary shield against those who might have usurped the throne from an infant king. During Chilthar's minority, Fredegund ruled Neustria with an iron fist as regent. She ruthlessly eliminated any potential threats to her son's position, including powerful nobles who questioned her authority or favored other claimants. Her methods were often brutal. She used poison, assassination, and political manipulation to neutralize her enemies. She was known to be incredibly vigilant, always anticipating plots and striking first. Her regency was marked by continuous warfare with Austrasia, led by her nemesis Brunhilda. These wars were not just about territorial disputes. They were personal vendettas, fueled by the desire for revenge and the struggle for dynastic supremacy. Fredegund relentlessly defended Chlothar's kingdom and his right to rule, ensuring that he would inherit a stable if war-torn realm. Fredegund's kingmaking was not about choosing a king from a pool of candidates. It was about ensuring that her son, the only surviving male heir, became and remained king. In the face of overwhelming odds, she battled rebellious nobles, navigated treacherous court politics, and waged war against powerful rival kingdoms, all to cement Chlothar's place on the throne. When she died in 597, Chlothar II, though still young, was firmly established as the king of Neustria. a position he owed almost entirely to his mother's relentless efforts and strategic brilliance. Her legacy is one of absolute determination and a willingness to commit any act necessary to secure her bloodline's royal future, making her one of the earliest and most able kingmakers of the early medieval period. Number 10. Brunhilda of Austrasia. Born a Visigothic princess, Brunhilda entered the tumultuous world of the Merovingian Franks in the mid-6th century, marrying King Sigebert I of Austrasia. Her marriage was meant to symbolize a powerful alliance, but it quickly spiraled into a devastating feud that lasted for decades and defined the early medieval landscape. This feud, primarily with her sister-in-law Fredegund, Queen of Neustria, was rooted in the murder of Brunhilda's sister, Galswint, by Chilperic I, Fredegund's husband. From that moment, Brunhilda dedicated her life to avenging her sister and securing the future of her own royal line, a future that she alone would largely sculpt. Brunhilda's king-making story begins in earnest with the assassination of her husband Sigebert I in 575, likely orchestrated by Fredegund. At this point, Brunhilda was a queen dowager with a young son, Childebert II, who was only 5 years old. Austrasia was left vulnerable, surrounded by ambitious magnates and the ever-present threat of Neustrian aggression. The traditional Frankish practice of partible inheritance meant that kingdoms were often divided among surviving sons, leading to instability. Brunhilda recognized the urgent need to secure her son's sole claim and to prevent the kingdom from fracturing. With her husband gone, Brunhilda acted with extraordinary speed and political foresight. She immediately sent Childebert II to Metz, the capital of Austrasia, where he was proclaimed king by the loyal magnates. This swift action prevented any rival claimants from stepping forward and solidified his position, even as a child. Brunhilda then assumed the regency, a role she would effectively hold for much of her long life, navigating the treacherous waters of Frankish politics. Her regency was not merely ceremonial. She was the de facto ruler of Austrasia, making crucial decisions regarding governance, warfare, and diplomatic relations. Brunhilda faced immense challenges during her son's minority. Powerful Austrasian nobles, known as the Optimates, resented her authority and plotted against her, seeking to undermine her influence and control the young king. She fought them with unwavering resolve, using her intelligence and political acumen to outmaneuver her adversaries. She was known for her administrative reforms, attempting to strengthen royal authority and the infrastructure of the kingdom, which further angered the independent-minded nobility. These actions were all geared towards creating a stable and powerful kingdom for her son, ensuring he would inherit a strong and undisputed throne. When Childebert II came of age, he initially supported his mother, recognizing her indispensable role in securing his power. However, he died prematurely in 596, leaving behind 2 young sons, Theudebert II and Theuderic II. Once again, Brunhilda found herself in the position of regent for her grandsons, solidifying their claims to separate kingdoms within the Merovingian domain. Theudebert became king of Austrasia, and Theuderic became king of Burgundy. Brunhilda's work as a kingmaker was far from over. She now had 2 young kings to guide and protect. She actively guided both her grandsons, but as they matured, they increasingly chafed under her formidable influence, especially Theudebert II. This led to conflict, and eventually, Theudebert expelled her from Austrasia. Unbowed, Brunhilda fled to Theuderic II in Burgundy, where she continued to wield immense power, influencing his decisions and actively campaigning against her other grandson, Theudebert. She encouraged Theuderic to wage war against Theudebert, which ultimately led to Theudebert's defeat and death. With Theudebert gone, Theuderic became the sole ruler of both Austrasia and Burgundy, consolidating a vast Frankish realm, a feat that Brunhilda largely orchestrated. Brunhilda's ultimate goal was always to secure the future of her family's royal lineage, no matter the cost. She faced betrayal from her own family, relentless opposition from the nobility, and constant warfare with Neustria. Her king-making was not limited to placing a single individual on the throne. It was about ensuring the continued dominance of her descendants within the fragmented Frankish kingdoms. Even in her old age, after Theudoric's death, she tried to secure the throne for his infant sons. But by this point, her enemies had grown too powerful. In 613, she was finally captured by Chlothar II of Neustria, Fredegund's son, and met a brutal end. Despite her tragic demise, Brunhilda's long and influential life as a regent, political strategist, and relentless advocate for her sons and grandsons firmly cemented her place as one of the most powerful and effective kingmakers in early medieval history. Number 9. Judith of Bavaria. The early 9th century saw the vast Carolingian Empire, a sprawling dominion uniting much of Western Europe under the rule of Emperor Louis the Pious. He was a devout man, but his reign was marked by increasing instability primarily due to the intricate and often conflicting claims of his sons from his first marriage and his second marriage. It was into this complex and volatile environment that Judith of Bavaria stepped, becoming Louis's second wife and Holy Roman Empress. Her story is one of fierce, maternal devotion, intertwined with ruthless political maneuvering, as she tirelessly worked to secure a kingdom for her only surviving son, Charles, later known as Charles the Bald, effectively turning her into a kingmaker. When Judith married Louis in 819, he already had 3 grown sons from his previous marriage: Chlothar, Pepin, and Louis the German. These sons had been granted sub-kingdoms within the empire and the succession plan. The Ordinatio Imperii was already in place, largely excluding any future children of Louis. The birth of Judith's son Charles in 823 fundamentally disrupted this established order. Judith, an intelligent and ambitious woman, immediately understood that her son, if he was to inherit anything substantial, would need a kingdom carved out of his half-brother's territories. This ambition was the catalyst for years of civil war and imperial fragmentation. Judith began to exert her influence on Emperor Louis, a man who, despite his pious nature, was often indecisive and easily swayed by those closest to him. She successfully persuaded him to revise the Ordinatio Imperii to create a kingdom for Charles. This decision to grant Charles a portion of the empire, particularly from the lands of his half-brothers, was met with furious resistance from Chlothar, Pepin, and Louis the German. They viewed it as an attempt to diminish their own inheritances and undermine the stability of the empire. This sparked a series of rebellions that would plague Louis's reign until his death. Judith was at the heart of these conflicts. She actively supported her husband against his rebellious sons, even when her own life was in danger. In 830, during one of the sons' revolts, Judith was accused of adultery and sorcery by her enemies, who also alleged she was manipulating the emperor. She was temporarily forced into a convent, but she skillfully maintained her network of loyalists and managed to clear her name, returning to court with renewed determination. Her resilience in the face of such accusations demonstrated her formidable character and her unwavering commitment to Charles's future. Throughout the 830s, Judith tirelessly campaigned for Charles's interest. She encouraged Louis to disinherit or diminish the portions of his other sons, particularly Chlothar, and to increase Charles's share. She used her position as empress to build alliances, influence key churchmen, and rally support among the nobility for her son. She played a crucial role in negotiating treaties and truces during the intermittent civil wars, always with an eye toward securing Charles's advantage. Her relentless efforts ensured that despite multiple rebellions, Louis the Pious continued to favor Charles, granting him larger and larger territories, even at the expense of his other sons. Judith's kingmaking was not about a single dramatic act. but a sustained decade-long campaign of political pressure, persuasion, and resilience. She leveraged her position as empress, her intelligence, and her fierce maternal protectiveness to alter the very fabric of the Carolingian succession. Her actions directly led to the carving out of a substantial kingdom for Charles, which would eventually evolve into the Kingdom of West Francia, the precursor to modern France. When Louis the Pious died in 840, the empire was plunged into a final, decisive civil war among his sons. Charles, largely due to his mother's tireless work in establishing his claim and securing his territorial base, was a strong contender. The eventual Treaty of Verdun in 843 formalized the division of the empire, granting Charles the Bald the western portion. Judith's relentless efforts ensured that her son was not only a king, but the king of a significant and powerful realm, making her a pivotal figure in the formation of medieval Europe's national identities. Number 8. Adelaide of Burgundy. The late 10th century in Europe was a time of shifting power and nascent kingdoms. In the heart of this turbulent era stood Adelaide of Burgundy, a woman whose life was a dramatic saga of political intrigue, kidnapping, imprisonments, and ultimate triumph. Her remarkable resilience and strategic brilliance allowed her to navigate the complex world of royal succession, ultimately becoming a powerful empress and a vital kingmaker for the Ottonian dynasty of the Holy Roman Empire. Her journey began when she was married to Chlothar II, the King of Italy. This marriage was intended to secure her family's position in the Lombard succession, but it would soon prove to be merely the first chapter in her extraordinary story. Chlothar died in 950, very likely poisoned by Berengar II of Ivrea, a powerful Italian noble who immediately seized the Italian throne and tried to force Adelaide to marry his son, Adalbert. Adelaide, refusing to legitimize Berengar's usurpation by marrying his son, was imprisoned in a castle on Lake Garda, stripped of her royal insignia and treated harshly. This dire situation, however, revealed her indomitable spirit. She managed a daring escape, aided by a priest, and found refuge in the castle of Canossa, from where she sent an urgent plea for help to Otto I, the powerful king of Germany. Otto I, a shrewd and ambitious ruler, saw Adelaide's plight as a golden opportunity to extend his influence into Italy. He marched his army across the Alps, rescued Adelaide, and in a politically astute move married her himself in 951. This marriage was not merely a romantic rescue. It was a strategic alliance that solidified Otto's claim to the Lombard crown and laid the groundwork for the creation of the Holy Roman Empire. By marrying Adelaide, the legitimate widowed Queen of Italy, Otto effectively absorbed her rights and claims, legitimizing his conquest and eventual rule over Italy. Adelaide, through her desperate call for help and her subsequent marriage, thus played a direct role in bringing a new powerful ruler to the Italian throne. Adelaide's king-making role became even more pronounced after Otto I's death in 973. Her son, Otto II, inherited the vast empire. Adelaide, now Empress Dowager, remained an influential figure at court, advising her son on political and religious matters. She actively supported his policies and helped him navigate the complex relationships with the Italian nobility and the papacy. She was a keen observer of politics and a shrewd negotiator, qualities that had served her well during her own struggles. However, her most critical period as a kingmaker came after the premature death of Otto II in 983, leaving behind a 3-year-old son. Otto III, as the heir to the Holy Roman Empire, the empire was once again plunged into a regency crisis. Various factions among the German nobility and powerful churchmen vied for control of the young king and the empire. Otto III's succession was far from guaranteed, especially with his extreme youth. Adelaide, alongside her daughter-in-law Theophanu, who was also a formidable empress, stepped forward to protect her grandson's rights and secure his throne. The early years of Otto III's reign were dominated by a power struggle between the empresses and Henry the Quarrelsome, Duke of Bavaria, who attempted to usurp the regency and even the throne itself. Adelaide and Theophanu worked together, rallying loyal supporters, securing the support of key bishops, and strategically using their imperial authority to counter Henry's ambitions. Adelaide's long-standing connections and immense personal prestige were invaluable during this period. After Theophanu's death in 991, Adelaide became the sole regent for Otto III. She tirelessly worked to educate her grandson, preparing him for his imperial duties, and continued to defend his rights against any who sought to undermine his rule. She traveled extensively, holding court, administering justice, and ensuring the stability of the empire. Her regency provided the crucial stability that allowed Otto III to mature and eventually assume full control of the empire. Her dedication ensured that the Ottonian dynasty remained firmly on the throne, solidifying its position for generations. Adelaide of Burgundy, through her personal endurance, strategic marriages, and tireless regency, was instrumental in installing and securing the reign of two Holy Roman emperors, Otto I and Otto III, making her one of the most powerful and effective kingmakers in medieval European history. Number 7. Theophanu. In the late 10th century, the Holy Roman Empire, a burgeoning power in Central Europe, found itself in a delicate balance. Its emperor, Otto II, was a powerful ruler, but his premature death would thrust his young Byzantine wife, Theophanu, into the spotlight as an unexpected but incredibly kingmaker. Born a Byzantine princess, Theophanu brought with her the rich cultural and political traditions of the Eastern Roman Empire. When she married Otto II in 972, this marriage was a strategic alliance intended to strengthen ties between the two empires and to legitimize the Ottonian dynasty through a connection to the ancient Roman imperial line. Theophanu was not just a queen. She was an empress, and her sophisticated upbringing in Constantinople had prepared her for a life of power and influence. When Otto II died suddenly in Rome in 983, the future of the Ottonian Empire hung by a thread. He left behind a 3-year-old son, Otto III, as the sole heir. The prospect of an infant king was a recipe for disaster in a volatile medieval world where powerful dukes and ambitious bishops constantly vied for power. The young Otto III was hundreds of miles from his German homeland, and powerful factions within the empire immediately began to plot. The most significant threat came from Henry the Quarrelsome, Duke of Bavaria, a cousin of Otto II, who had been deprived of his ducal title by the late emperor. Henry saw an opportunity to seize the regency, and perhaps even the throne itself, from the infant king. Theophanu, initially viewed as a foreign queen, quickly demonstrated her extraordinary political acumen and unshakable resolve. She immediately understood the precariousness of her son's position. Her first crucial action was to ensure that Otto III was recognized as king by the highest authorities. She orchestrated his rapid coronation in Aachen, the traditional coronation site for German kings, just weeks after his father's death. This swift move was vital as it conferred legitimacy on the young king, making it harder for usurpers to challenge his claim. However, Henry the Quarrelsome, undeterred, kidnapped the young Otto III, attempting to consolidate his control over the regency and the child. Theophanu, alongside her formidable mother-in-law Empress Adelaide of Burgundy, launched a counter-offensive. They did not resort to military force directly, but rather to shrewd political maneuvering and the strategic use of ecclesiastical power. Theophanu, through her deep understanding of imperial protocol and her network of loyalists, rallied the support of key archbishops and bishops who understood the importance of maintaining the Ottonian dynasty for the stability of the empire. She summoned imperial diets and councils where she eloquently argued for her son's legitimate rights and exposed Henry's ambition. Her diplomatic efforts were highly effective. She persuaded the powerful Archbishop Willigis of Mainz and other influential churchmen to demand Otto III's return. The moral authority of the church, combined with the loyalty of many nobles, eventually forced Henry to release the young king. From that point until her death in 991, Theophanu ruled as regent for Otto III with absolute authority, often sidelining her mother-in-law Adelaide, who, while supportive, was less directly involved in daily governance. Theophanu's regency was a period of remarkable stability and strength for the empire. She was not merely a placeholder. She was an active and decisive ruler. She commanded armies, held imperial courts, issued charters, and presided over legal matters, always in the name of her son, Otto III. She managed relations with neighboring kingdoms, skillfully dealing with challenges from the Slavs and the French. She even led military campaigns to protect the empire's borders. Her experience from the sophisticated Byzantine court, where empresses often held significant power, had clearly prepared her for this role. Her kingmaking was about ensuring that her son, against all odds, not only survived but thrived on the throne. She navigated the treacherous waters of court politics, thwarted ambitious rivals, and provided the firm hand needed to govern a vast and diverse empire during a vulnerable minority. When she died in 991, Otto III was a promising young ruler, firmly established on the imperial throne, poised to fully assume power. He owed his reign and the continued strength of the Ottonian dynasty overwhelmingly to his mother's exceptional capabilities as a regent and a kingmaker. Number 6. Anne of Kiev. The 11th century in France was a period of consolidation for the Capetian dynasty, which, though long reigning, still struggled to assert its authority over powerful and often rebellious feudal lords. Into this challenging environment came Anne of Kiev, a Ruthenian princess from the powerful Kievan Rus realm, who married King Henry I of France in 1051. Her arrival was significant, marking one of the earliest examples of a marriage between a Western European monarch and a princess from Eastern Europe. Anne was educated and literate, a rare quality for women of her time. And she brought with her a sophisticated understanding of governance from her highly developed homeland. This background would prove crucial when she was unexpectedly thrust into the role of a kingmaker. When King Henry I died in 1060, his eldest son, Philip I, was only 7 years old. The Capetian dynasty was still relatively fragile, and a child king presented an enormous risk. The kingdom was surrounded by ambitious nobles, many of whom owed only nominal allegiance to the crown, and were eager to exploit any weakness in central authority. The stability of the Capetian line, and indeed the future of France, depended entirely on a strong regency. Conventionally, a male regent, often a powerful duke or a high-ranking cleric, would have been appointed. However, in an unusual and progressive move for its time, Anne of Kiev was named regent for her son. Anne immediately took control, demonstrating a political acumen that defied expectations for a foreign queen. She understood that her primary task was to secure the throne for Philip and to prevent the kingdom from disintegrating into civil war or being seized by rival lords. Her approach was both firm and pragmatic. She quickly established a powerful council of loyal advisors, including influential archbishops and nobles who supported her authority. One of Anne's most critical actions was her handling of the powerful and often rebellious Norman dukes, particularly William the Conqueror, who was then Duke of Normandy and would soon invade England. Anne understood that direct confrontation with such a formidable figure could destabilize her son's already precarious position. Instead, she chose diplomacy and careful management of alliances, striving to maintain a fragile peace where possible. She also used her personal prestige and connections from her native Kievan Rus to bolster her authority. As her literacy and knowledge of foreign courts impressed many, Anne's regency was not without its challenges. There were internal rebellions and attempts by various factions to undermine her authority. However, she consistently proved herself adept at navigating these political currents. She oversaw important administrative duties, issued charters, and acted as a final arbiter in legal disputes, all of which strengthened royal authority in her son's name. Her signature on royal charters alongside her son's, a rare occurrence for a medieval queen, speaks volumes about her active and direct involvement in the governance of the kingdom. She even engaged in direct correspondence with popes, including Pope Gregory VII, demonstrating her diplomatic reach and influence. Her actions were entirely focused on ensuring that when Philip came of age, he would inherit a stable and united kingdom. She preserved the royal domain, protected the financial resources of the crown, and maintained the loyalty of crucial vassals. This was king-making in the purest sense, providing the foundation, protection, and political stability necessary for a young, vulnerable heir to grow into his royal role without being overthrown or having his kingdom dismembered. Anne of Kiev's regency lasted until Philip came of age in 1066. By then, the Capetian monarchy was more secure than it had been at the start of her regency. Philip I was able to fully assume his royal duties, largely due to his mother's decade of tireless effort, strategic alliances, and firm governance. Anne's legacy was the successful transition of power, ensuring the continuity of the Capetian dynasty at a critical juncture in French history. She proved that a foreign queen, even one from a distant land, could be an indispensable and powerful force in securing the throne for her son, thereby shaping the future of a major European kingdom. Number 5. Constance of Sicily. The late 12th century in Europe was a time of immense political and dynastic struggle, particularly concerning the Holy Roman Empire and the wealthy Kingdom of Sicily. Into this maelstrom stepped Constance of Sicily, the posthumous daughter of King Roger II of Sicily, the last legitimate heir of the ruling Norman dynasty. Her life was defined by the intricate dance of power, marriage, and succession, culminating in her extraordinary role as a kingmaker for her legendary son, Frederick II. Constance's story began with her forced isolation in a convent, as a prophecy foretold that her marriage would destroy Sicily. Yet, fate and the machinations of emperors had other plans. In 1186, Constance was unexpectedly taken from the convent to marry Henry VI, the ambitious son of the Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick I Barbarossa. This marriage was a monumental political event for the German Hohenstaufen dynasty. It meant a potential claim to the rich Norman kingdom of Sicily, a strategic jewel in the Mediterranean. For Constance, it was a terrifying ascent to the pinnacle of European power and an escape from a life of monastic seclusion, but also a dangerous entry into a world of ruthless imperial politics. When her nephew, King William II of Sicily, died childless in 1189, Constance became the legitimate heir to the Sicilian throne. However, the Sicilian nobility, fearing German domination, largely opposed the Hohenstaufen claim and elected Tancred, an illegitimate cousin, as their king. This immediately plunged Constance and Henry into a struggle for her rightful inheritance. Henry campaigned relentlessly, but it was Constance's existence as the direct legitimate heir that provided the basis for his claim and gave him the necessary leverage to eventually conquer the kingdom. By enduring the arduous military campaigns and asserting her rights alongside her husband, Constance was instrumental in securing the throne of Sicily for the Hohenstaufens. True test of Constance's king-making abilities, however, came after the death of her husband, Emperor Henry VI. In 1197, Henry's death was sudden and unexpected, leaving behind a 4-year-old son, Frederick, who was now the heir to both the Holy Roman Empire and the Kingdom of Sicily. The German princes immediately began to dispute the imperial succession, with rival claimants emerging. Recognizing the immense danger to her young son's life and claims, Constance made a radical and highly strategic move. She chose to separate her son's Sicilian claim from his imperial claim. To protect him from the ambitions of the German princes and to secure his hold on Sicily, she officially crowned Frederick as King of Sicily in 1198. Crucially, she placed her son under the protection of Pope Innocent III, one of the most powerful popes in history. This act was a masterstroke. By acknowledging papal overlordship over Sicily, Constance effectively neutralized the German threat to her son's Sicilian inheritance and gained a powerful ally in the Pope. She knew that the papacy would prefer a strong, independent Sicily to a Sicily controlled by a powerful German emperor. Furthermore, Constance dismissed many of her husband's German officials and advisors from Sicily, replacing them with local Norman administrators. This move appeased the Sicilian nobility who resented German influence and rallied them behind the young Frederick. Her actions were swift, decisive, and entirely focused on preserving her son's inheritance and ensuring his survival. She streamlined the administration, stabilized the kingdom, and secured its borders, all to provide a solid foundation for Frederick's reign. Constance's kingmaking was not merely about securing a title. It was about safeguarding the very existence of her son as a future monarch. She strategically sacrificed imperial control over Sicily for the immediate security of her son's crown, ensuring he had a secure base from which to operate. Her decisions during this critical period ultimately allowed Frederick II, the future Stupor Mundi, wonder of the world, to survive his vulnerable childhood and eventually claim the Holy Roman Empire, uniting it with Sicily under his rule. Constance died in 1198. Shortly after placing her son under papal protection, confident that she had done everything in her power to ensure his future as a king. Her legacy is that of a queen who, through a combination of political acumen and a fierce maternal instinct, forged a path for one of medieval Europe's most iconic rulers. Number 4. Blanche of Castile. In the early 13th century, France was a kingdom on the cusp of becoming a dominant power in Europe, but its future stability hinged on the careful stewardship of its young monarchs. When King Louis VIII of France died prematurely in 1226, he left behind a 12-year-old son, Louis IX, as his heir. The prospect of the child king always invited trouble in the medieval era, and France was no exception. Powerful and independent-minded barons, many of whom harbored old resentments or sought to expand their own territories at the crown's expense, saw an opportunity to challenge royal authority. It was into this volatile situation that Blanche of Castile, the king's mother, stepped forward, not just as a regent, but as an extraordinary kingmaker who secured the throne for her son and cemented the Capetian dynasty's power for generations. Blanche, granddaughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine and niece of King John of England, was renowned for her intelligence, determination, and political astuteness. She had been chosen by Louis VIII on his deathbed to be the sole regent for their son, a testament to his trust in her abilities. This appointment was highly unusual for the time, as regencies were often held by male relatives or councils of nobles. Blanche immediately understood the immense challenge before her. She had to protect her young son, secure his coronation, and suppress the inevitable baronial revolts that would follow. Her first act as kingmaker was to ensure Louis IX's rapid coronation at Reims. Despite the winter weather and the active opposition of rebellious lords, she personally escorted her son to Reims, demonstrating her unwavering resolve in defying those who sought to disrupt the ceremony. Coronation, though sparsely attended by the defiant nobles, provided a crucial symbol of legitimacy for the young king. Immediately after the coronation, Blanche faced a series of formidable baronial rebellions, led by powerful figures like Peter Mauclerc, Duke of Brittany, and Hugh X of Lusignan. These lords, often secretly supported by King Henry III of England, aimed to dismantle royal authority and redistribute power among themselves. Blanche, however, was no pushover. She proved to be a brilliant military strategist and negotiator. She personally led armies demonstrating a courage and leadership rarely seen in queens of her era. She forged alliances, exploited divisions among the rebellious barons, and used a combination of military force and diplomatic pressure to systematically crush the rebellions. Blanche's regency was characterized by her unwavering firmness. She refused to yield to the demands of the rebellious nobles and relentlessly pursued those who challenged the king's authority. Her actions were always designed to reinforce the legitimacy and power of the Capetian crown. She wisely negotiated peace treaties when opportune, but always from a position of strength, ensuring that the king's authority was upheld and expanded. For example, she personally led campaigns that ultimately suppressed the revolt in Brittany, consolidating royal control over this vital region. Beyond military campaigns, Blanche was an astute administrator. She managed the royal finances effectively, strengthened royal justice, and continued the administrative reforms initiated by previous Capetian kings, all of which bolstered the central government. She was deeply involved in her son's education, instilling in him a strong sense of justice and piety that would define his reign as St. Louis. Her guidance shaped him into one of France's most revered monarchs. Blanche's king-making went beyond merely defending the throne. It was about actively building a stronger foundation for the monarchy. She successfully protected her son through a turbulent minority, putting down major rebellions, negotiating advantageous treaties, and ensuring that Louis IX inherited a kingdom that was more unified and powerful than ever before. When Louis IX finally came of age and took full control, he did so with a secure and stable realm, thanks to his mother's tireless efforts. Blanche of Castile's extraordinary regency ensured the continuity and future glory of the Capetian dynasty, making her one of the most effective and influential kingmakers in French history. Number 3. Isabella of France. The early 14th century in England was marred by a deep chasm between King Edward II and his powerful barons. Edward's favoritism towards male favorites, his military incompetence, and his disregard for traditional noble privileges had alienated much of the English aristocracy, leading to repeated crises. Into this volatile environment stepped Isabella of France, daughter of the formidable King Philip IV of France and wife of Edward II. Initially, her marriage was a symbol of peace between England and France, but over time Isabella became increasingly disillusioned and then utterly enraged by her husband's behavior, especially his reliance on the unpopular Hugh Despenser, the younger. Her transformation from loyal queen to ruthless revolutionary would make her one of history's most infamous and effective kingmakers, directly leading to the overthrow of her husband and the coronation of her son. Isabella endured years of humiliation and neglect at the hands of her husband and his favorites. The Despensers in particular exerted undue influence over Edward, accumulating vast wealth and power. Often, at the expense of the queen and other nobles, Isabella's lands and income were diminished, her access to her husband restricted, and she was forced to endure public slights. Her frustration festered slowly, turning into a burning desire for retribution and a new order. Breaking point came in 1325, when Isabella was sent to France to negotiate a peace treaty with her brother, King Charles IV of France, regarding the long-running dispute over Aquitaine. While in France, she reunited with her son Edward, Prince of Wales. This was her opportunity. Rather than returning to England, she openly defied her husband, refusing to go back as long as the Despensers remained in power. This act of defiance was a declaration of war. In Paris, Isabella found a powerful ally, and soon a lover in Roger Mortimer, a prominent English baron who had been exiled by Edward II for opposing the Despensers. Together, Isabella and Mortimer forged a formidable alliance, united by their hatred for Edward II and their ambition. Isabella used her position as the King of England's wife and the daughter of the French king to garner support. She raised an army, financed by her brother and other sympathetic European rulers, who recognized the legitimacy of her grievances. Her public image as a wronged wife and mother seeking justice for her son was a powerful tool. In September 1326, Isabella and Mortimer launched their invasion of England. Their landing was met with widespread support. The English nobility, weary of Edward's misrule and the Despensers' tyranny, flocked to Isabella's banner. Her campaign was swift and decisive. Edward II found himself abandoned by nearly everyone. His authority crumbled, and he was eventually captured. The dispensers were summarily executed with brutal public displays, satisfying the vengeful queen. With Edward II imprisoned, Isabella faced the crucial task of formalizing the transfer of power. She did not attempt to rule in her own right, understanding the political landscape and the need for a male monarch. Instead, she engineered the deposition of Edward II, citing his incompetence and unfitness to rule. This was a revolutionary act, as English kings were considered divinely appointed. However, with the overwhelming support of the nobility and the church, a parliament was convened that formally deposed Edward II and proclaimed his 15-year-old son, Edward, as King Edward III, Isabella's king-making. She did not merely support a claimant. She actively orchestrated a coup, overthrew an incumbent king, and placed her own son on the throne. Her actions marked a dramatic and unprecedented shift of power. Although she and Mortimer would effectively rule as regents for Edward III, for a few years, her son eventually asserted his own authority, culminating in Mortimer's overthrow and execution. Nevertheless, it was Isabella's daring, strategic brilliance and relentless pursuit of justice that had cleared the path for Edward III to become one of England's most celebrated kings. Her legacy as the she-wolf of France remains a testament to her potent king-making abilities, forever changing the course of English history. Number 2. Margaret of Anjou. The 15th century in England was a period of intense dynastic conflict known as the Wars of the Roses, a brutal struggle between the houses of Lancaster and York for control of the English throne. The heart of the Lancastrian cause, fiercely defending her husband, King Henry VI, and, more importantly, her son, Prince Edward of Westminster, was Margaret of Anjou. Margaret, a French princess, married the gentle and pious Henry VI in 1445. She arrived in England to a court already fractured by political rivalries, and a king who, though well-intentioned, was increasingly incapable of effective rule, prone to bouts of mental illness. Margaret's life became an unending struggle to preserve her family's claim to the throne, transforming her into one of history's most formidable and relentless kingmakers. Margaret's role as kingmaker began in earnest as Henry VI's mental health deteriorated, making him incapable of governing. The powerful Richard, Duke of York, a rival claimant to the throne through his descent from Edward III, saw an opportunity to seize power. In 1453, Henry VI suffered a complete mental breakdown, leaving the kingdom without an effective ruler. The Queen, who had just given birth to her son Edward, saw her family's position directly threatened. The birth of an heir, far from securing the throne, only intensified the dynastic struggle as the Duke of York now had a direct Lancastrian child to contend with. Margaret refused to accept York's ascendancy. She was fiercely protective of her son's rights, and possessed a far stronger political will than her husband. She gathered a faction of loyal Lancastrian nobles and began to actively oppose York's regency. Seeing him as a threat to her son's inheritance, her determination was absolute. She was a woman of strong character, eloquent and persuasive, and she commanded respect, though also fear, from her supporters and enemies alike. The first major clash, the Battle of St. Albans in 1455, marked the official start of the Wars of the Roses. While initially a Lancastrian defeat, it galvanized Margaret into direct action. She recognized that the throne was not merely a matter of inheritance, but of active struggle. She personally took charge of the Lancastrian war effort, raising armies, negotiating alliances, and leading her forces in a way almost unheard of for a medieval queen. She was a tireless campaigner, traveling across the country, rallying support for her husband, and, crucially, for her son, whom she presented as the rightful heir to the throne. Margaret's kingmaking reached its peak when in 1460 Richard of York laid claim to the throne itself, rather than merely the regency. Margaret famously declared that she would never disinherit her son. She rallied the Lancastrian armies, and led them to a decisive victory at the Battle of Wakefield in December 1460, where Richard of York was killed. This victory seemed to secure the throne for her son, but it was short-lived. York's son, Edward IV, soon rallied the Yorkist forces and defeated Margaret's army at the Battle of Towton in 1461, forcing Henry VI, Margaret and their son into exile. Even in exile, Margaret refused to give up. For years, she tirelessly sought aid from France and Scotland, working to restore her husband and son to the throne. She endured immense hardship, traveled widely, and used all her diplomatic skills to keep the Lancastrian cause alive. Her relentless efforts eventually paid off when, in 1470, she forged an unlikely alliance with her former enemy, Richard Neville, the Earl of Warwick, the Kingmaker, who had fallen out with Edward IV. With Warwick's help, Henry VI was briefly restored to the throne. A moment of triumph for Margaret, though ultimately fleeting. Margaret's kingmaking was about maintaining her family's hold on the throne through sheer will and military prowess. She did not choose a new king. She desperately fought to keep her husband and son as kings, navigating an incredibly complex and violent political landscape. Her personal leadership in battle, her diplomatic skill in securing foreign aid, and her unwavering belief in her son's right to rule defined her every action. Her efforts, though ultimately unsuccessful in the long term, profoundly shaped the course of the Wars of the Roses. She embodied the spirit of a true kingmaker, not just by installing one, but by continuously battling against overwhelming odds to ensure her chosen king, her son, had a chance to reign. Her final defeat at the Battle of Tewkesbury in 1471 saw the death of her son, effectively ending the Lancastrian cause and breaking her spirit. But her legacy as a queen who fought to the bitter end for her son's crown remains unparalleled. Number 1. Eleanor of Aquitaine. Eleanor of Aquitaine, born in 1122, was arguably the most powerful and influential woman of the High Middle Ages. Inheriting the vast and wealthy Duchy of Aquitaine in Gascony at a young age, she was a coveted prize, a sovereign in her own right, and a woman of immense intellect and charisma. Her life, spanning nearly 8 decades, was a whirlwind of 2 royal marriages, multiple rebellions, long periods of imprisonment, and the raising of numerous children, including 3 kings. Her influence was so profound that she didn't just play the role of a kingmaker once. She shaped the destinies of multiple monarchs, directly installing, supporting, or undermining those who sat on the thrones of France and England, making her the quintessential kingmaker. Eleanor's first marriage in 1137 was to Louis VII, King of France. As Queen of France, she participated actively in court life and famously accompanied Louis on the Second Crusade. This marriage produced 2 daughters, but no male heir, which was a source of increasing tension. After 15 years, the marriage was annulled in 1152 on grounds of consanguinity. This event, though seemingly a personal failure, was her first significant king-making act, albeit indirectly. By becoming available, she presented an irresistible opportunity for another ambitious monarch. Just 8 weeks after her annulment, Eleanor made a shocking and strategic move. She married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou. Henry was 11 years her junior, but a formidable figure. It combined Eleanor's vast Aquitaine with Henry's already extensive territories in France, creating an Angevin empire that stretched from the Scottish border to the Pyrenees. This move immediately catapulted Henry into a position of overwhelming power, making him a direct threat to the French king. 2 years later, in 1154, Henry became King Henry II of England. Eleanor, by bringing her immense lands and prestige to the Union, had played a critical role in establishing one of the most powerful medieval dynasties. She did not just marry a king, she married a duke, and through her assets, helped make him a king of a vast empire. Eleanor's kingmaking took a more direct and rebellious turn later in her life. Despite her immense power and influence as Henry II's queen and the mother of his many sons, their relationship deteriorated. Henry's philandering and his attempts to curb her power in Aquitaine led to a bitter estrangement. In 1173, Eleanor actively encouraged her elder sons, Henry the young king, Richard, later Richard I, the Lionheart, and Geoffrey, to rebel against their father. She sent her younger sons, Richard and Geoffrey, from her court in Poitiers to join the rebellion, providing financial and political backing. This was an astonishing act for a queen, actively orchestrating a civil war against her own husband to empower her sons. She wanted them to rule their own territories, and she wanted to see her favored sons on the throne. Though the rebellion failed, and Eleanor was imprisoned by Henry for 15 years, her influence on her sons' ambitions never waned. She remained a symbol of the rights and power of Aquitaine, which her sons sought to control independently of their father. When Henry II died in 1189, Eleanor was immediately released from confinement. She was 67 years old, but her political energy was undiminished. Her first act was to travel throughout England, ensuring that her second surviving son, Richard, was recognized and proclaimed as King Richard I. She managed the transition of power, buying commanding allegiance in her son's name, something few others could have achieved. She played a crucial role in stabilizing the kingdom during this critical period. Her king-making role continued throughout Richard's reign. She acted as regent during his absence on the Third Crusade, and during his subsequent imprisonment in Germany, tirelessly working to raise his ransom and secure his release. She managed the kingdom, handled administrative affairs, and suppressed rebellions, most notably those instigated by her youngest son, John, who attempted to usurp the throne. Her efforts kept the throne secure for Richard, ensuring he returned to a kingdom ready for him. Perhaps her most direct act of king-making came after Richard's death in 1199. The succession was disputed between her youngest son, John, and her grandson, Arthur of Brittany, son of her deceased son, Geoffrey. While Arthur had a strong claim, Eleanor, with her vast experience and political acumen, threw her considerable weight behind John. She personally rode through Anjou and Maine, securing their loyalty to John. She leveraged her immense personal prestige, her network of vassals, and her wealth to ensure John's coronation as King of England and Duke of Normandy. Her influence was decisive. Without her backing, John's claim would have been far weaker, and he might never have ascended to the throne. Eleanor of Aquitaine was not just a queen who witnessed kings. She was a force who actively made them. She propelled Henry II to the English throne through her marriage and lands. She orchestrated her sons' rebellion, shaping their political destinies. She then tirelessly secured the throne for Richard I, and finally she decisively backed John, ensuring his coronation. Her long life was an interwoven tapestry of power, influence, and the strategic manipulation of succession, making her without question the ultimate medieval kingmaker.